So there's a guy named Carlos who has been seeing a girl around his college who he thinks is very beautiful. This girl has different classes, different friends, so he knew that naturally they would never like really meet while at school, but there was a party and he happened to see her at that party. I'm so sorry, my neighbor has dogs, ignore that. So while at this party, he was staring her down and he was there with his friend, and he went as far as to tell his friend, like, you know, in life, your wishes just need to come true, and if I don't go up to this girl now, it'll be now or never. So he walks over to her group of friends, looks at nobody else in the eye except for that girl named Karina. Before he even says anything, Karina goes to her friends, see, I told you he was gonna come over. And that's when Carlos pulled his hand out and said, hi, I'm Carlos, what is your name? And she says, hi, I'm Karina. So they actually spent most of that night talking, and they got along so well. So well that he was like, can I have your number? And Karina was like, no. And he was like, what the hell, right? But then she says, I want you to come up to me the next time you see me. I don't want you to have my number yet. And he's like, okay. So the next day comes and Carlos goes to class and he happens to see her, and this time he went up to her and they actually had an even better conversation than they did at the party the day before. Days would go on, same thing, they would have great conversations. So maybe after about a week, Carlos doesn't see her anymore and he also doesn't go looking for her. The next day comes and Karina actually goes up to him and she was like, hey, why didn't you come look for me or find me? And Carlos responds with, because I knew I was going to see you again. I know I'm always going to see you again. And this time she giggles, she grabs a pen, pulls his arm out, and writes her phone number on his arm. She says, I think it's finally time you have my phone number. So time has passed and Carlos and Karina have gotten married. It was a small ceremony, but it was beautiful, and the way they looked at each other was so much love. Like everybody at that wedding could see that these people were like in love with each other. I know what you're thinking, Letty, why are you giving us this love story? Wait for the ending, okay? So time would go by and they lived together and they both had jobs. So they would both go to work in the morning, but he would always return home before her. So every night when Karina would come home, she would be like, hey, I'm here, love. And he would say, I know, you always come back to me. He explains how like every time she comes home, you could just see how much love she has for him when, you know, she looks at him and says, I'm here, love. And he would be like, I know, you always come back to me. There was one day where Karina got home a lot later than her usual time. And when she got home, she says, I'm here, love. And he says, you always come back to me. Except for this time when he looked her in the face, he said that there was something that just broke his heart. He said that in that moment, without even like thinking about anything that was going on with her, he saw in her eyes that she didn't love him anymore. Carlos was like distraught. He was heartbroken. There is a saying that says, don't go looking because you will find. And Carlos went looking and he definitely found. He found out that Karina was seeing somebody else. Not just that, but he saw the way Karina looked at the other person, and that was the look that he'd known for a very long time. He knew that she just wasn't in love with him anymore, and Carlos just became something different. Carlos at this point was destroyed, but he thought to himself, like, I don't think I'm gonna tell her what I saw. I think I'm gonna pretend that I don't know anything, because what if I can convince her to love me back and look at me the same way she used to? He wanted Karina to look at him with those, you know, those loving eyes, and he was convinced that he was gonna make it happen. He basically told himself, like, I'm gonna do anything that I need to do, but she's gonna return back to me. And it was that same night that she actually didn't even come back home. He was like sad, he was crying, and at this point he just like needed to get out of the house. It was like 4 or 5 in the morning and he was walking down his like the streets just like sad. And it was at this time where as he was walking, he saw a well in front of him, a wishing well. And this is where he pulls out a coin and puts all of his emotions into this, all of his energy, and throws the coin in and makes the wish that she needs to love me again. She will forever come back to me. She's gonna love me forever. That is my wish. Obviously he was desperate. I mean, desperate enough to like make a wish into this well, and goes back home. At this point, it's been 2 days. He was like even worse than before, you know, that day that she never returned, and he had been home. He hadn't gone anywhere. He at that moment was in the dark at home, sitting there with no lights on in silence. Out of nowhere, in this silence, he hears a sound, and then he hears footsteps. They were the very, very familiar footsteps that he'd known for a long time. He knew that those steps were Karina. He said that he also heard something weird, like there was something off, but when he heard the front door open, he knew it was Karina, and he became very emotional. At this point, he was still in the dark, but he was excited. He was like, oh my god, like this wishing well worked. She came back to me. He was happy. Like, it took over him, this happiness. He didn't even care that she had cheated on him. Like, he was happy that she was back. So when the door opens, he's in the dark, but he sees her silhouette. You know, he was happy. But then he saw something strange. He finally realized why her footsteps sounded weird, and it was because when Karina was standing at the door, she was barefoot. So he gets a little closer to the door into her, and at this point, he felt something was off, like the vibes, like the energy. But he still started to get closer and closer to her, and that's when she says, "I'm here, love. Like always, I came back to you." And that was when he was the closest he could have been to seeing her at that point. And he noticed something terrible. What had returned was Karina's body. She had no eyes. She had things poking out of her, like her organs. Her body returned. That was because Karina had had an accident that night 2 days ago. And now her body is at his house because it escaped the morgue. And that wishing well granted Carlos his wish. Can you imagine? Like, he was so excited. She had no eyes. Like, she was dead. The reason she didn't return was because she was dead. He wished for her to come back, and he got his wish granted. And no, I don't know if this is real or not. I mean, I don't know. But I still thought it was a good story, and this ending, what do you guys think? You will always come back to me.